Welcome teachers to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. This is the first video only for you. I am basing this video on the document I posted on the CAT and IT Facebook group. So if you don't have it yet, go to Facebook. I'm going to try and show you because I'm not so clever with Facebook. Go to our group and click on Files. And then if you scroll down to, it was in 2022, it is a Word document. There we go. It is called 12 IT PAT 2022. Download that as I'm going to base my video on this document. To give you an idea, today is the 12th of March and my grade 12 learners have completed their PAT Phase 1, all apart from the scenario and scope, the users, what they are, who they are, and what they are going to do, and the navigation. My plan is to do that next term, and then they will all be done. The reason for this is because I do the syllabus in a little bit of a different order from what we are supposed to. But years ago, I made this decision because I got into trouble with my grade 11s who had to do a PAT with a database. I was called into the office with a principal and a facilitator because they weren't yet done with their PAT. However, they only were taught the PAT in term 3, well, the databases in term 3, and therefore it was very difficult for them to plan their phases, especially phase 1, which was based around the database. So for this reason, the principal after the meeting told me, you know what, do what is best for your kids. And I decided that year that I will do things differently. What is best for my kids? So if you are following my textbooks, that is the reason why I have SQL in grade 11. I do SQL in grade 11 term 1. And then in term 2, I do arrays and text files and methods, functions and procedures all in one go. And then in term 3, I do the addo tables section. That means that if their PAT requires them to do a database, they would already understand what a database is by the start of term 2, and they can start planning on their phase 1. So there's the method to my madness. The current grade 12s I have did SQL and addo tables last year, and therefore as soon as we received the PAT in January, I was able to start with the planning of phase 1. And this is how I went about completing it. The reason I want learners to bring their PAT documents to school on a flash drive is because we often get excuses about their internet at home being down, or possibly the internet at school being down. So the flash drive will always work, and that is why I ask them to bring their work on a flash drive. It's also their responsibility to make a copy of the PAT, and I don't take excuses like computers that will break. I've even had in winter computers that were struck by lightning. I use the same document for grade 11s and 12s, and this, if you snooze, you lose, I implement in grade 11 quite strictly. And in grade 12, then you have a lot of success with learners bringing their stuff in on time. So first of all, I need them to create and design a database on a piece of paper. At the back of my books, I have a section for class notes. So my grade 11s and 12s have to use one of these pages to design their database on. The reason I do this is because if they do it on a piece of paper like they did in the past, they would lose it. So this is their place to design it so we can always refer back to it. As in my books, I explain short sections at a time. I don't try to explain the whole PAT in one go. So we start off with a database, and I'm not going to explain to you all of these details. There is another video explaining what to do here. But in preparation of this lesson to explain to them how to design their database on paper, I sit at home and I come up with a few of my own ideas. In the class though, I would ask who has some ideas, who has a topic, and then we come up with 2 tables and a couple of fields, and we think about it. But I do have a backup plan in case no one comes up with no ideas, as would sometimes happen. We would draw something like this on the board, where we have the parent table and the child table, where the primary key here links to a foreign key there, and I ensure that whatever we do as the example meets all the conditions at the top. This explanation I do as soon as I can once I have the pad, and also I print this document that you have in front of you. I print for the kids with the rubrics, and the actual official pad document I just share with them electronically because it is hard for them to understand that document. This really summarizes what they need to know. At the beginning of the year, I would start with OOP, with this program where we do this program together. And by the time this is done, this first program, the books program, they would then have their designs of the database on paper, and they would then start with the activities on their own of the OOP section of my book. So from the time that I explain this, depending on when we get the pad, up to when I have a look at it, I give them more or less a week. Then during class time, while they're all busy with these activities, the OOP activities, there are quite a few, I would go to each learner one-on-one, and we will normalize their table together. So I'll have a look at whether they have calculated fields. They will indicate the link to me, and we'll discuss whether their plan would work or not. I prefer that they don't use logins for databases, because what are you going to do with that? You don't want to see everyone's login. You need 2 users. What are the other users going to do with the logins? How are you going to create a one-to-many relationship? I tell my learners that logins are really there just to guide you to the right tab sheet. We don't use logins for databases or for text files. I am privileged to have a double lesson in a cycle. So I prefer to do the following in a double lesson, but it is very possible to spread it over 2 single lessons. I'll explain it that way. So my learners then have the following due for the next double lesson. That is after I checked all the designs so that they on paper, so that I'm sure that everyone has a normalized table. They then need to collect data. It could be one Excel workbook with 2 sheets or 2 Excel workbooks, it doesn't matter. As long as what they have at the top is their field names that they are going to use, and then the data on the inside. So here's one. This I exported from some random database that I use as an example. So this one here would be the child table. So they have 2 sheets, parent and child. And I keep referring to parent and child because that is the easiest to explain in class. In the document, I refer to this site, very handy, and you can go and search for different types of data in here, and also you can change, in some of them you can change, we can for example choose a country and so on, but you can download this data into Excel, which is great. Also very handy to set tests with if you need to design a database or a text file. The explanation of what to do is in here. I'm not going to read through all of that for you guys. But they then bring it to class, and again, if they snooze, they lose. And this is the bit that they struggle with on their own, is we then import from Excel, we import the data into a database using Access. Very important is to save it as a MDB and not an ACCDB, as it struggles to connect to Delphi when you're using the new version, the new file extension of Access. So if you are doing this over 2 lessons, I suggest that you import it. Then I make everyone stop and I explain the next section about changing the data types and about changing your short text fields to 255. They then also have this document and can make extra notes if they need to. And for the first lesson, you would then just do all of this and make sure that every foreign key has a value in the parent table of the primary key. And once everyone is done with that, then only would we link the tables together. Even though I do the importing with them, making use of my own Excel spreadsheet, so to show them where to click and what to do, this part I really just explain, as each pat would look differently, so they would each need to pick their own primary key and so on. However, when we then get to the linking, then I'll go back to my database and I will show them how to link and how to click on enforce referential integrity and make sure everyone then has this one-to-many relationship. They would then have more or less a week to complete their VCL. So in class, on the same lesson that we link the database or the tables to one-to-many, I would then just help them to create and save, because grade 12s forget how to save new programs, or grade 11s as well, just to show them, here we go, create the VCL, file save all, save it properly with your _u_p in your PAT folder, but this we save in PAT phase 2. Then we add tab sheets. I show them how a tab sheet works because sometimes they forget. And they have to have at least 3. Very important for their next lesson or their next due date is that they have at least 2 DB grids somewhere on those tab sheets, because then we would like to link it. So why I said the due date is more or less a week is, let's say we do it on Thursday. I might have time the next week, Tuesday or Wednesday. But I always include a weekend because some of these kids are really busy at school and won't have time to design their database. Sorry, I mean the interface, because the database is done. So I always make sure that my due dates are after a weekend, even if it's not a complete week. But I won't be unfair and give it on a Friday for a Monday. Some people go away on a weekend. So just more or less a week, and then they bring it to school and we start the linking. Again, this whole section I would explain in class. There's quite a bit to explain here. And again, I'm not going to read through all of this, but just how to design a proper interface and everything that one needs to keep in mind. This is all based on the rubric. And then when they come back and they bring all of this to school, we would then link it. So we have one Addo connection, and then we have at least 2 SQL Addo queries, and then of course your DSRs. I prefer to have the 2 Addo queries for SQL so that the different DB grids link to different Addo queries, so that if I run a SQL query, the same output won't display in 2 tables, which is usually a bit of a problem. Of course, you can also use Addo tables, but I do find that if the PAT does not require us to do database programming, that SQL is really much easier to score those marks. But it's up to the learner whether they want to use SQL or Addo tables. This is now in 2022, or maybe a bit of both. There are, however, sections in the PAT, like for example, the group by and the aggregate functions, which my guess is that it is SQL related. So I'm not quite sure always what the PAT expects, but SQL would make it easier to make use of a group by with an aggregate function, of which they usually need 2 of. In my Dandelion Delphi Book 2, in Appendix C at the back, you would find all the steps to link the database, making use of a data module. You don't need to use a data module. They can do it just on the form as well. But the linking steps are explained here. The first part here for the Addo connection, and then for an Addo query, so see what is needed and what you would like your learners to do. If your school makes use of OneDrive, this is what I've done, but there's other ways to do it too. I would ask the learners to submit parts of their PAT. You can see here, I don't want to go in there because that will reveal their names, but I make a folder in my OneDrive. This I also installed as a drive on my computer, and I give them smaller due dates for phase 1. So you can see there was one on the 7th of February, then on the 14th, then on the 25th, and then I'll have my final one next term. I've just made an example here to show you how to do it. Of course, you can let them submit or maybe copy out from the network if you don't have OneDrive, but this I found worked really well. If you now, and I got this idea from Annie van der Merwe, so I can't take credit from it. I've made this folder, then you click on the 3 dots and you select request files. So here, what you do is you say, I need PAT phase 1. Let's say you wanted the database, because that is what I suggest that you ask the learner to submit. The first thing is to submit your database. Then you click next, and you would then, I can't remember now. Oh, you copy out the link, and I share then this link on Teams to my learners, or maybe you can email them, whatever your form of communication is. But this link you give them. So what happens now is they click on the link and they upload the document. It asks for their name and their surname, and when it falls into this folder, this one here, this will currently be empty, but once they submit something, it will be sorted according to their name and their surname, because their name and surname will form part of the document without you having to tell them, please put your name and surname in the front. And what I've done this year, and that was some fantastic advice from Tanya de Toy, is I would actually then mark that section. So I print out my mark sheets and I mark it. If I receive rubbish, I don't mark it at all. I let the child redo it, and in this way, those like giving second chances story, that is all covered, because I sent them messages on Teams, which I screenshot in a Word document as evidence. If I then really don't get anything out of them, I would email the parents, and I would also tell them in class, please, I am not happy with this. You have not done X, Y, and Z. Please go and redo it. I'm not marking it, and resubmit it. So that then is done. Then the database is done, and I have less marking at the end, and I'm sure my learner's PAT is on par. The problem is if your database is wrong, that whole PAT document is not going to work. So your whole PAT phase 1 and 2 is not going to work. It's all really based around your database. And if you do this with your grade 11s, then in grade 12, it would be their second opportunity to basically do the same thing, so they have some experience with the PAT and databases. So even though the phase 1 document requires them to design their database on paper, I don't know how one would mark it on paper, because you can't check all their fields. I check that it's normalized. I check that they have changed all their fields and all the requirements as I've explained up to now. And I mark mine electronically. Then what they would do is, once they get it back, they would then copy that database to phase 2, and they would make the changes I suggested in phase 1, they would make in phase 2. But since you now have a copy of that database, it means that they can't make changes to it later after you have marked it. So these are just my ideas. Guys, if you want more videos like this, I'll make more, but I just thought I'll make one and see what the response is, and you guys let me know if you want me to explain some more. Thanks for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Hope to see you soon.